Okay, so welcome everyone. Glad you could be here on this meeting right before the holidays. So we're going to pick up kind of where we left off from last time, which relates to the reading that we did for this week and also our discussion about anchoring phenomena. So to start us off, I want us to do a brainstorming activity. I want us to write down 5 ideas for anchoring phenomena that you could use for a unit in your classroom. So you know your standards, you know the content that you teach. Let's think of just 5 ideas. They don't have to be good ideas, okay? The whole goal of this is just to start brainstorming, playing with ideas and thinking about what might work. So think about the ideas in addition to maybe the river otters or beyond just the otter phenomenon, right? So we've created a Jamboard for you. Let me get that link. I'll put it in the chat. And you'll just work in pairs to think about some of the ideas that you have that might work in your classroom. Again, don't feel like you're tied to any of these ideas, but let's just see what you come up with at this point. Sound good? So everyone, if you could click on the Jamboard link in the chat just to make sure it's working. Let me know if you have any trouble with that. Okay. All right, everyone, is it working for everyone? Okay, so I'm going to send you into breakout rooms to start your brainstorming. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to do this, just so you have some time to talk and record all of your awesome ideas. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. So at 3:47. Recording. All right, so we'll come back to these ideas in a little bit. But what we're going to do today is review our ambitious science teaching practices and discussion about phenomena. Then we're going to do another activity about phenomena. So it's called the phenomena sort. And then we're going to come back to these ideas that we just brainstormed and think a little bit more deeply about them and have some more time. And we're going to talk about the reading, the chapters that we want to review for today. So as I know all of you are familiar with, we are using the return of river otters as our anchoring phenomenon for a lot of the work that we've been doing, but that you are not tied to using this phenomenon, right? You can use any phenomenon that is appropriate for your students and your school site. But what makes a good anchoring phenomenon? How would you decide on an anchoring phenomenon if you're not using the river otters? So just a reminder that our definition of a phenomenon from ambitious science teaching is a puzzling event or process whose full explanation requires a wide range of science ideas to be coordinated with one another and with evidence. So we want it to be data-driven, evidence-driven, right? We want it to be something that's sufficiently complex that it keeps students interested. I think we also need to recognize that very often there isn't always one clear-cut answer. Like, for example, even with the river otters, right? It was probably a whole bunch of different things that led to their return to the Bay Area, not just one thing in particular. So again, we want this phenomenon to be sufficiently complicated and interesting so that it sustains students' engagement. And so our role as the teachers is to really create the opportunities for students to be engaging and thinking about this phenomenon and doing all sorts of learning that helps them in that sense making and creating those opportunities. So why use anchoring phenomena? Again, because we know students learn best when content is contextualized, when there's like a problem or an event or a process that students are trying to explain. Obviously, when it's something connected to their lives or their interests, they learn best. Students learn best if they're able to revise their ideas over time and show their increasing depth of knowledge and understanding of a topic. And so they need that time, that time set aside for students to revise their ideas and use new evidence and new information, and also get feedback, and not just from you as their teacher, but also from their peers, and have those discussions, right? That discourse that can lead to deeper thinking. So I've shared with you some of these examples from before, but like in kindergarten, here's one of the ambitious science teaching examples that's even used and brought up in the book. How can someone little push something big off the end of a slide, right? Think about the physics that you could be teaching and the model that students could be creating about that, about what that looks like and how that happens. Same thing with like a solar eclipse, right? So to understand why solar eclipses are predictable and rare, there are a lot of different science concepts that you can integrate about like the sun and the moon and the earth and that system and the solar system and gravity, and like think about all the different concepts that you could be exploring in relationship to understanding solar eclipses. And then of course, same if you're trying to understand killer whales in the Puget Sound, or why any population is declining, all of the ecology and evolution and human impacts and other things that you can be connecting back to understanding why a population of killer whales or monarch butterflies or whatever it is might be declining. So, and also keep in mind that just because your focal animal or phenomenon is a whale or a butterfly doesn't mean that all of the learning in the unit, right, has to be about the butterflies or the whales or the otters. It can be about some other organism, but then hopefully that learning helps inform or move your thinking forward about, okay, so then what's happening with the otters or what's happening with the whales? So again, you're not tied to just exploring a particular organism within the unit, even if you have a particular organism as a phenomenon. And I just want to remind us that there's sort of two main types of phenomena. There's sort of this change over time. So something is changing, like the return of the river otters, right? They were absent and now they're here. So like what's going on? But the other option is like a compare contrast. Like let's look at these two different types of volcanoes, or let's look at these two different types of ecosystems and like explain what's different or why they're different and how that's happening. So you really could use either kind in the work that we're doing together. So we just want to help you in thinking about which kind of phenomenon are you doing? Are you doing a change over time, like trying to understand the otters and how they've changed their range over time, or like growing a seed into a tree, or is a compare contrast situation? And either one is totally great. So the other things that we want to keep in mind, which we've kind of already discussed, are like other criteria that make a phenomenon a good, compelling phenomenon for a unit of study. So again, is it something observable that happens over time? Can we connect this, to a particular time and a place? Doesn't have to be a long period of time, could be a very short period of time, but can you actually observe that or in some way look at data or evidence of it using images or videos? And then again, does it happen in a particular place, right? Like you want to be specific. Hopefully it's something that's relevant to students' lives and maybe even a place that they've been, right? Like the otters, that's why the otters work really well. And then are there lots of different ways that you could be exploring this phenomenon? So using observations, as I mentioned, data sets or images or videos. We use a lot of videos of the otters, right? In the way that we've explored them and learned about them. And then, again, does it have the potential to motivate and sustain the students' interests? And then finally, does it connect to, student learning outside of the classroom or out of school time experiences, right? So these are the main criteria that we want to use when we're thinking about, is it a good phenomenon? Is it something we want to move forward with in the way that we're planning? So the activity we're going to do now for probably the next like 15 or so minutes is in pairs. I'm going to have you think about a list of potential phenomena that I'm going to give you and think about if they meet some or most or none of the criteria in that checklist. And I'm going to have you, so you can organize them into this little table. And then I'd like you to pick one of them, one of the potential phenomena, or you could be brainstorming a totally new phenomenon. Maybe you could continue working on one of the ones you just worked on in your groups, but I want you to improve upon a phenomenon. So come back to the group and share out at least one example that you feel is better than some of the other examples you've seen in the phenomena sort activity. So this is what your Jamboard is going to look like. So you'll each be in groups, and then you'll have these little cards that you can drag and drop into the different parts of the table to sort them. And then again, so you want to improve on at least one of those, or a new phenomenon that you feel like would meet most of their criteria. So if we switch over to the Jamboard, so if you go forward to, let's see, I think it's frame 7. This is where you'll get the instructions are here on the Jamboard, and so you don't have to remember all of what I just told you, and so you can look at the criteria checklist again. And then each group will have their own Jamboard where they can drag and drop these different cards into the table and decide if they meet some or most or none of the criteria that we're looking for with phenomena. Does that make sense? Any questions? And I will drop the link to the Jamboard once again, just in the chat in case anyone needs it. And I'm gonna reshuffle the breakout rooms. One second here. Sorry, everyone, one second. Okay, I'm gonna open the rooms, and we'll see you in about, I'll check in with you about 10 minutes. So at 4:12, and then we'll see how far we've gotten. Sound good? Okay. All right, welcome back, everyone. How'd that go? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. So what I would love is for us to talk a little bit about what we thought of the different phenomenon ideas, and also for each group to share out the phenomenon that they improved upon. So let's just start with some of these examples. So I'm just going to pick one randomly. So let's talk about seals and their pups on the beach. Do you remember that example? And here I can go to a blank Jamboard. So where did we put that one?
We put it in does not meet criteria.
Okay, and you want to explain why? Why would you put it there?
It's just sort of, it could be, I'm just basically an observation. It doesn't show anything over time. It doesn't, it's not married to a particular event. I don't necessarily know if you could engage students learning with it so much. Or if there's, it's so general that, I mean, I was telling, my students just did a research paper, and it was like, it's like the little, you want to find something not too big, like Goldilocks, not too big, not too small, just right. And I think that is just too, you could go anywhere with that. So it needs to be dialed in. And what we were talking about in our group was the phenomenon of the elephant seals returning to Drake's Beach during the government's shutdown. Oh,
awesome. So explain a little bit more about what that was, Anna, for those of us who might not be familiar.
Well, it seems so wild ago, in those pre-COVID times when we could go and meet up a lot in these NOAA grants and go on field trips. Well, during the time, when Trump, our former president, didn't sign the bill, and so there was the Point Reyes all the rangers, didn't have a budget. So those parks and parking lots were shut down.
Yep.
And Drake's Beach parking lot was shut down. And then after a few weeks, all these elephant seals started to haul out and use it as their pupping place. And quite a big number. And then the public was able to go if they kept at a distance. And I think they're still pupping.
I think they're still going there. Megan, you probably know the best out of all of us. They're still
They are. I just saw the first big male show up on Drake's Beach this week.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So more will come, and they've recently done a restoration there, so it's very different from how it used to be. And I'm really interested to see how the e-seals will react to that. It'll be fun.
So I like what you're saying, because we're talking about a particular place now, right? Rather than just some generic beach or any beach, right? And you're also talking about very specific change over time. Anna or someone else, do you want to describe what that data might look like that would describe that change over time? What would we be counting or measuring or observing in the example that Anna gave?
I think you could look at historical records of when, in the historical record, when was the last time elephant seals were observed on that beach?
Yep.
Or where are the, what beaches and haul outs near there? What sort of are the criterias for elephant seals to choose a beach to haul out? And why might they have chosen Drake's Beach? What about the government shutdown might have corresponded with that timing?
Exactly. Awesome. So lots of different types of data you could be using to be looking at, to actually be looking at numbers and observations. You could use, again, images, videos, and also graphs showing elephant seal counts in different places over time. And that this was a beach where they were not observed historically before the beach was sort of vacated by the national parks and the public. So all of that data would be really great to introduce to the students as part of the phenomenon, right? That's how you would launch that phenomenon with your students. And then you can think about all of the ecology and evolution and marine biology and even sort of the human impacts, what's our relationship with this particular species over time, and how have they been hunted? There's a lot of rich content that you can connect to that phenomenon. So awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Okay, but as it stood, the way that it was written, that seals and their pups on a beach did not meet the criteria because we need a particular place and a particular time. Okay, let's go. Thank you. So let's go to another example. So let's look at seasonal increases in plant growth in a garden. What did we say about this one?
I'm looking at that, and I think we put that on meets most criteria. But as I look at it now, the location is not specific enough in that, maybe the person that wrote it had a specific garden in mind, but they didn't call that out. And so it may not be specific enough to be relevant or for your students to care. A random garden. If at our school we have a garden, if we're referring specifically to our habitat garden, and we could even narrow it down to a specific type of plant if they wanted to, then that would capture students' interest, I think, more, especially given that that's a place which they have access to on a daily basis.
Awesome. So I think in the ways that you described, Sandra, you could totally build on this idea and make it very specific and very context rich for your students. And I really do like that idea of even digging in and saying this particular species, and maybe picking a species that would be connected to all sorts of other, again, phenomena or pollinators, or, what is this, what's the significance of this plant? So I think that's a great way to focus it and make and push it into that meets most criteria category. Anyone want to build on those ideas that Sandra shared? I thought that was great. Okay, and I heard a lot of people talking about sea level rise. So let's go with this one. So sea levels are rising in California and Florida. What did we say about that one?
That's the one that we chose to just improve by adding like sort of like a compare contrast piece to it to California, and Florida, and then like the let's see where'd she go? Let's see. Megan, are you there? She wrote it down, so that's why.
Oh yeah, sure, I can go to that. Great.
But we had like kind of put it in maybe at first, and then we were, and so then we kind of wrote down how we would improve that one. I mean, it does have a location, and it does, if you're saying sea level rise, there's sort of like a change implied, but it didn't feel like it was specific enough and that something was kind of missing there for us to feel like it met most of the criteria. So we just added like a few words for us to feel comfortable then saying it meets most.
We took it, we kind of talked about doing it both as a compare and a contrast and a change over time. So the two we kind of changed it to was, why are California and Florida sea levels rising at different rates? Just to kind of compare the two different coasts. And then if the change over time would be like narrowing it down to a more specific place. So how has the sea level fluctuated, like in, for instance, like the Monterey Bay or the San Francisco Bay? So just kind of giving it a little bit more of an exact location.
Yeah.
And you're really framing it as a question, which is a part of coming up with a phenomenon. Like, and they talk about that in the book chapters that we looked at for this past week, which is like, then you have to come up with like the big driving question. And those hows and those why questions are really the types of questions that go well with anchoring phenomena. Something that is sufficiently complex needs a how or a why in order to actually explain it. So I like the way you rephrase, you added some more detail and some more explanation, and then you use those how and those whys to ask those questions. So that's great. Anyone else? Did anyone else talk about the sea level rise example?
I think Molly went to students for a few minutes, so I can share that our team also.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Just added to make it more local, like affect like in the area where the students live. So it will be really also motivating and engaging.
Yeah, so be talking about sea level rise very locally, wherever you might your school is located or where your communities live. That makes sense. Definitely. Anyone else or anything else related to that one?
For that one, we talked about a specific restoration project that's happening right there where most of those students live, so they can actually meet people who are working on that project and do education around that project and get interested in it because it is about their neighborhood.
Yep. So again, can it be engaging through a variety of activities and resources and opportunities? And that's what we're going for. So that's great. Thank you, Megan. Awesome. Anything else? Does anyone want to talk about any of these in particular, or they have any questions about some of the other ones? But I think we talked about a lot of the criteria and why we categorize them the way they did. And it's okay if we categorize them slightly differently, right? Like that's fine. But I think for the most part, all of these could be improved upon, right? In some way. But any others that you want to share your thoughts on?
Well, we talked about the starfish ones. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And then we talked about the anchoring phenomenon. That's again, they're too general. So talk about the phenomenon of the sea star wasting disease, where the populations of sea stars have decimated, I don't know, in the past 10, 15 years. And again, working with local agencies, restoration, going to specific tide pools. I'm looking at pictures over time.
Awesome, exactly. So what you're really describing there are the kinds of data you would use to investigate how a starfish population changed over time. So looking at those numbers over the last like 8 or 9 years that have changed so dramatically along the West Coast, and using that major change as the anchoring phenomenon for a unit about understanding, you know, everything from population dynamics to intertidal ecology. Like there's so much biology you can teach related to that phenomenon. And I shared this with that group. I'm actually working with a group of teachers in Santa Cruz who are developing a unit about starfish wasting disease. And I would love to share those resources with you. I think they will be ready to share soon. So I will keep you posted. But yeah, a really, really great, compelling phenomenon that takes this idea of, okay, like some kids may have been to the beach, they may have seen starfish, they may know what a snail or mussel is, but like, let's really dig into like what is changing and a particular place, which is really the entire West Coast, but we could even just look very locally at our Marin and Sonoma County coast. And we have data that shows that there have been major drops in the population levels of starfish there. So again, you can make it local, you can make it a change over time, and then it opens up so many opportunities for exploring different concepts. So a great revision of some of these ideas. So thank you. So is this helpful to sort of practice with ideas that like aren't your own and just sort of say like, no, this isn't quite a phenomenon. Like, what do I do with this? Because I find that it just takes practice to figure out what a good phenomenon might be for the groups of people that, you know, students and teachers that I work with, by practicing with just like playing with ideas, and they just get better over time. So I see some nods. So hopefully this was useful and engaging, and at least got you thinking about those criteria and what makes a good phenomenon. So any last thoughts or comments or questions about your discussions in this group activity? Okay, so I think where we're going next is we kind of want to review a little bit about the reading that we did for this week. And if you didn't have time to do it, that's okay. We're going to kind of, again, review it together. So Sigit, if you want to lead part of this discussion, please feel free to jump in.
So in this chapters 1 and 2, especially in chapter 2, we talked about phenomena, and then we also talked about identifying ideas and identifying big ideas. And we wanted to first just talk about what is your take of big ideas. What did you take from reading, or from reading last year if you read it, or you can even, I wrote the pages if you have the book next to you if you want to look at it, or just whatever comes to your mind about the meaning of what is our big ideas.
I'll just throw out there that I am behind on my reading, and I apologize.
No worries.
No worries.
No worries. So even take some guesses. What does that phrase seem to imply to you?
Yeah, exactly.
Big ideas.
It sounds like a concept, like a sort like a foundational concept that that students would learn through the curriculum.
Great. So foundational, it's an important word, yeah, like something that is like things built on. Anyone want to build on this or bring in different?
So I think of big ideas as overarching. You know, it's big enough, it's and general enough that students have a buy-in. You know, students have experience or knowledge of, whether it's through TV, television, you know, personal experience, so they can, you know, get their feet wet before delving deeper into, you know, why is this big idea important to explore, right?
So, and do you mean that this is something that kids already know from their knowledge?
Yes, that they have some knowledge,
Okay.
whether it's from parents, whether it's from books, whether it's from field trips, they
Mhm.
have some idea.
Okay.
They might not have all the details,
Yeah.
but they have some idea, and so they're going to have more buy-in.
Okay.
Anyone else want to build on some of those ideas? So what are some of do you want to move on, Sagit? Sorry, I'll let you.
Yeah, we can, before we ask the question down there, can we move to the next?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the chapter has different ways to talk about big ideas and also how we get there. The main thing is that fundamental to explaining most phenomena related to the topic. So it's like if you deeply understand it, then it helps you explain other ideas. And then we wanted to just like play and think about what are big ideas in the river otter phenomena, and again, it's probably different, depends where you want to take it, but kind of like what are big ideas that you take, like if you do reverse engineering of this, what are kind of big ideas that come out?
So, like related to river otters, human impact on the environment,
Okay.
wildlife, yeah, right.
Mhm.
Let's see.
What else? Anything else?
What about if we back into it by saying we know that river otters really have to eat a lot of food compared to because of their body size? So think about what's the big idea that goes along with that.
Food webs and interconnectedness of food webs of local habitats.
And I guess I'm thinking that yes, and also maybe physiology in some way, energetics.
The physiology of animals.
Or of river otters in particular.
Specifically the river otter, yeah.
Yep.
With it. And I'm thinking of that just because river otters have super high energy needs because they have to stay warm in water and they're mammals. So they need to eat a lot of calories to stay warm. So they need to eat more for their body weight than for their body size than a lot of other animals.
Do they have as nice, is their furs different than sea otters then? It's not as compact, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's not as thick. It's about half as thick, although it still is pretty thick, but it's not as thick as sea otters.
But what you're bringing up is that reality that like evolution, right, has lots of different ways that it can there are lots of different forms of adaptations that have evolved to deal with cold environments, right? Whether it's about fur or blubber or consuming lots of calories, or right, there are variations on this, and so you can really be applying that to thinking broadly about evolution and the processes and the process that leads us to having these different body plans. And I think the other thing that we've also talked a lot about is, so related to that, of course, is structure and function, right? So that's like a general concept, a big idea about how organisms look, right? That we can relate back to our unit. Any other, again, those really big ideas that we can relate back to the otter unit and our otters. let's think about our watershed.
Yeah, I was just thinking of like water. To me, that ties a lot into human impact. I mean, like that's super overarching, but like if you're talking about like water quality, temperature, those things are going to impact what lives there.
Yep.
And so then that impacts the food sources of the predators.
So we really could think about that in terms of biodiversity, right? That all of that is, why can't I type more? Trying to make like an arrow, like that really that's about determining who lives there and what lives there, right? And those are big concepts about biodiversity that we can explore.
Right.
And then we can add ecosystem functions into that too.
Yep. Oops, sorry, I'm having trouble typing for some reason.
And then it becomes a college course.
Right, and then it takes 3 years to learn about the river otter. But you can see how rich this is, right? This is a good phenomenon because it opens you up to these different directions. And that's why also at every grade level in K through 12, you could study the river otters and hit on some of your standards, right? There's totally an opportunity here for it to be relevant and connected to the content that you are expected to teach at your grade level.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also how they mention in the book that once you decide what is your big ideas and the ideas that come out of it, then you can really focus and throw away for the other ones because there's so many, and then it can be too confusing. So kind of like leads you in the way that you plan your unit based on the phenomenon.
Exactly. So it's important to really focus in, like, what are those big ideas that are super important and how do they connect to the phenomenon? Let's make sure the phenomenon is the right thing to connect with these big ideas that we know we want to hit. And so I'll just show really quickly this diagram from the reading that like it's a back and forth, right? You can be adjusting and reevaluating these things. So you start with your standards, and then you can be thinking about the anchoring phenomenon and how you're explaining that phenomenon and how the standards align and correlate with that. But then you also have to figure out, okay, what are the activities and the learning experiences that students are going to have to make sure that we're hitting all these things, right? And that it's a back and forth. We need all three of these things to sort of inform each other and refine each other as we develop our units over time. Anything else you want to add, Siggy, to move the conversation? I think that was great. I think we came up with a great list. So we want you to take a little more time now that you've thought a little bit more about phenomena and you've practiced on some phenomena that were not yours, not your ideas, but we want to put you back into groups for about 5 minutes to really start rethinking about your phenomenon. Again, don't have to have your final ideas, but we want you to revise at least one idea based on what you've been thinking about now and what you've learned doing the phenomena sort and all that thinking you did. So, and if you like try to start making a list of what are the big ideas that you would connect to this phenomenon in the way we just did with the otters, with the otter unit, okay? So I'm gonna put you into new groups and you can go into the breakout rooms to have your discussions for a little bit. So again, you know, we don't expect you to finalize your phenomena, but we just want you to start refining another idea really quickly in the next 5 minutes or so. Okay. I just want to make sure, sorry, 1 second. Okay. All right, I'm going to send you into your rooms and I'll see you in like 5 minutes and then we'll wrap up for the day. Sound good? And make sure you keep typing up your ideas on the Jamboard. And you can use whatever Jamboard room you're in now, and you can copy paste or move over your ideas if you want to. So just make sure there's somewhere that you're putting down your ideas with your name. Okay, see you soon. All right, welcome back. So I want to be mindful of the time and honor your time, but I'm really glad you were able to join us today and continue your brainstorming about phenomena and thinking about the units and the work that you want to do in the new year with us and with your students. We're so excited to support you in that. So just in this last minute before we all leave, I want to remind you that we want to learn more about your classroom as much as we can. So we will be reaching out again to you if you haven't already heard from us with an invite to a folder where you can share materials so that we can support you in developing units moving forward next with this school year. So things that would be useful, a syllabus or existing unit plans, that you would like to enhance or make better, any information about outdoor or schoolyard projects that you want to do or connect to with this project. And also any materials or textbooks or curricular programs that you're using, finding out if you can give us access so we can see what you're working with, and then we can help you even work with that and enhance it in the ways that you want to make it locally relevant, right? To make it connect with your students and your schoolyard and your place in Marin. So again, examples, maybe you want to connect some standards, so share those standards with us, or maybe you have a curriculum already the district provided. Please share whatever you can with us. Maybe you have a unit that you developed yourself, but you want to make sure there's more data and outdoor experiences as a part of it. So again, we'd love to work with any and all of these types of experiences with you. And I just want to show you really quickly what Amy at the Cove School created based on her experience last year and over the summer. This was her 4th and 5th grade classroom at Cove School, showing this wall of her driving question and her driving question board with all the student questions and the group models that her students made. And she had this whole section on structure and function of otters. So again, you could do this about any organism, right? This doesn't have to just be the otters, but this is a way you can visualize and sort of set up your classroom and lay out the different parts of the practices that we're using. So for example, here's a model that she created with her students of showing the interrelationships between, again, stuff we've talked about, pollution and natural habitats and restoration and fresh water, and how are all of these things interrelated to explain the impact on our river otters. So we just wanted to share this with you as an example of what this could look like and what we want to help you work towards using some of the practices that we've been exploring. So next time we're meeting on January 13th. So we just want you to have a restful and happy holidays and enjoy that time. We would love for you to take a quick look at chapters 3 and 4 though in Ambitious Science Teaching before we meet again. So even if you don't want to do it over the holidays, hopefully those first 2 weeks are enough time for you to do that then. And we'd really love to see those teaching materials, hopefully before January 10th. If there's just anything you can share with us, anything at all, we would love to have time to review those. And again, just start thinking about what are the phenomena that you want to use with your students, and what are those big science concepts, those big ideas. And we're going to continue working together on all of this next time. And we do have an office hour scheduled for January 19th, but we're also setting up time individually with people. If you can't make that time, we can set up another office hour for you or you and a colleague, and we can meet with you and set up a time that works for you. And if there are still teachers at your school who might be interested in joining us, feel free to invite them. We'd love to, grow the group over time. We still have, some spots available. And I think that's it, unless Megan and Sigit, if you have anything else you want to add, or are there any questions, we can hang out for a few minutes. But again, just great working with you as always, and happy holidays. Enjoy your break, well-deserved, well-earned break. And we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everybody.